Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hi, and welcome to Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan. And I'm Susan.
And I'm Lisa. Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about simple living and the green movement, and that's a big subject.
I know. We might have to do more than one show. But I'm very excited about this show because I have been really interested in simplifying life for a long time.
Yeah.
And my friends who come to my house often tell me I'm a minimalist because I try to
Because you've got nothing hanging on your walls, right?
Well, I have some things hanging, but everything that's hanging is something I really care about. And I really try to minimize the number of things I have in my house.
Yeah.
Now, if you went in my office, we'd have a different conversation, but
Yeah.
my house is pretty, I try to keep it that way because I find that I am less stressed when I have a more simple surrounding. But I also am very much into the green movement. I'm huge into recycling and lowering the thermostat and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very excited about our show today.
Well, when we first started talking about the show, I mean, these days there's a lot of good reasons to engage in more simple living, and a big piece of that is the economics.
Sure.
I mean, when you're constantly buying things,
Yes.
you know, you can really dig yourself into debt pretty fast. So when I think of simple living, I also think of frugal living.
they're related, for sure.
And I think it's all win-win. I mean, it's good for the environment. It's really good for your peace of mind, your stress level.
Yeah.
You know, visually, it's really good. And to the extent that if you're digging yourself into debt because you're buying things you don't need, and suddenly you find a way not to be doing that anymore, that's really good for your stress level too.
Absolutely. And there's just something, every time I think about simple living, it's just sort of like, oh, that's good.
It's like Walden Pond,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like, oh, all good.
It's just like, oh, it's not like I want to go live in the country somewhere and not, ever go to the mall or the movies. But it's more a matter of, we've made life so complex.
But you know what I think is really fascinating? Like the more we get, we modernize and we get more into our technical gadgets and whatnot. So our technology advances. There seems to be a deeper need, a more urgent need to live simply too. So we're like taking off like this with our technology, and this goes back to like our overarching theme of the show, that need to connect to one's family, to oneself, to one's neighborhood.
Yeah, community, absolutely.
And one's community.
Yeah, very cool. Well, it's time for us to bring on our fabulous guests. I'm very excited.
That was deep, wasn't it?
Yeah. You are deep. I'm very excited. We have two wonderful guests with us today. So first we have Diane Campion, and you have a business called Organize This.
Yes,
and in a moment I'm going to ask you to tell us about that. And then also we have Kevin Carpenter here, who is with Volunteer Simplicity. Did I say it right?
No, I'm active in Troy Voluntary Simplicity.
That's what I meant to say.
Yep.
And so why don't you first, Diane, tell us a little bit about how you got into organizing and sort of simplifying. You've been with us before, but remind our viewers a little bit about who you are.
I got into organizing because I spent most of my professional career on the road. And so I found when I would live for months in hotels. So I found when I got home, if things were a mess, that it was just so overwhelming to come home to. And I had to be able to live my life out of a box and a car and a suitcase on the road. So you had to be pretty organized and pretty simple in the way you did things.
It takes a different way of thinking, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I'm always like thinking one step ahead, and I think I think, in a linear fashion based on time and calendars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. We're going to get more into that, but let's bring Kevin in. Tell us a little bit, how did you get involved in simple living and the green movement? I know that that's a big part of what you're
Right.
interested in.
Well, professionally, in the environmental field, I'm an environmental engineer, but I'm very passionate about the simple living and voluntary simplicity.
What does that mean exactly?
Voluntary simplicity. What does that mean?
Well, it's an intentional way of living that gives you a more meaningful life, really. But there's many aspects to it, and people approach it from a lot of different ways. I guess one example, you guys brought up some very important aspects of it, one of which is the consumption. And as we know in this country, there's a tremendous amount of consumption. And I think I realized after a while that stuff doesn't equal happiness.
Yeah.
I think we've been convinced that if we can buy a lot of things, we're happier, and that's sort of a substituting for happiness. And I read recently they call it the happiness treadmill, where you buy something and you have some very short-term happiness, but pretty soon that's gone, and then you buy something else. And then maybe, like you were saying, you have to make more money to keep up the consumption because you think that that's the happiness. But there's a deeper way of living that's more satisfying. So for me, that was one of the things that made me move towards that was reducing the stuff.
That's great. That's great.
And it gives you more freedom, does it not?
It certainly does, time-wise, money-wise, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about the benefits of not just being organized, but really the simplicity. What are the benefits to us personally? What's the benefits to the community? Because if buying stuff doesn't give you happiness, and all you're doing is spending money, and it doesn't have any long-term benefit, then what else? Let's give our viewers something else to think about, like what else is possible.
Well, a lot of people I find are overwhelmed with life, and especially like moms are overwhelmed, and some of that overwhelm comes from stuff.
Yeah.
If you are working in an overwhelming environment that's cluttered and disorganized and full of stuff, it's really difficult to think clearly, I find. And especially if you have any glimmer of ADHD, or if your kids do, to have a lot of stuff is so distracting and so detrimental to the thought process and to just being able to plan and
Because
calm down.
you have to fight through the stuff.
Right.
Like if you battle through the stuff, then you're always thinking about what do you do with the stuff? How do you organize the stuff? And there's a whole industry of just containers.
Yeah.
What's the container to buy to
The
put in
container
your
store.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
You have to clean the stuff.
You have to clean
Yes.
the
And
stuff.
if you've noticed in this country, something over the last decade or two is all the self-storage. So not only do we not have,
Yeah.
we have so much stuff that we can't even store. Now we're paying to store our stuff elsewhere. At that point, maybe.
Why is it so
incredible.
hard to get rid of stuff?
Well, there's a lot of emotional attachment to stuff.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that, and I try to tell this to my clients and my students, every square inch of space in your dwelling costs you money.
Yeah.
You're heating it, you're lighting it, you're cooling it, you're putting water through it and
Right.
whatever. And, do you want it taken up with a bunch of stuff? You're paying for that stuff. I mean,
Right.
forget the whole move towards storage, which I think is like obscene. Why do you need a store, unless you're going overseas or something and going to
Right.
come back, why do you need a storage unit?
And I see these pods that people
Oh,
have outside
yeah.
their house. These I forget what they call them. They're
Pods. Yeah.
And people have them to put
Yeah.
stuff in.
Yeah.
It's like, really?
My mantra is the less you have, the less you have to organize. So, when people say, like, how much is it going to be for me to get organized, I tell them it's entirely up to you. The less stuff you have, the less effort you have to put into organizing. It's
Yeah.
just easier.
The less you'll have to organize.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an enhancement to our own self because we're not so distracted. Perhaps we'd be more focused, and it takes less energy to keep. The less stuff you have, the less energy it takes to maintain it, right?
And the
Absolutely.
more time you have, you're freed up because
Yes.
if you're not always having to clean the stuff,
Right.
organize the stuff, look at the stuff, think about the stuff, you're free to do other things with that additional time.
So how do you get started? Where
Yeah,
do you
good,
start?
Good question.
Well,
How did you get started on your movement? Were you always? I mean, you've always been kind of focused on the environment, and that connects to the other things.
It's been a long time, but I'm still not where I want to be. You know, there's always, it's a progression. But one of the, you know, we just went through the holiday season. I think that's a great time when people realize, you know, we sometimes feel compelled to buy things, often for things for people who don't need more things. So it's a real cultural aspects, and it's very stressful too. You know, and I think that's one of the areas that really related to stuff that got me going was why am I feeling all this stress to buy things? Yeah. And so I slowly got rid of that. And you also mentioned community. So as you stop focusing on stuff, you start to realize that some of the satisfying things are interactions with your community. And then the other area that is very interesting to me is knowing where my food comes from. So knowing your farmers markets, it's all related to this. You know, it's simple. You can simplify in many different ways.
So by knowing the farmers, getting to know the farmers, you're not eating foods that are processed and complex. You're actually eating simpler foods.
Yeah. And you know, animals are generally treated better. The food doesn't have to travel from across the country. When we keep local farmers in business, then the green space is preserved and local jobs. So it just compounds. The benefits are just tremendous.
Well, one thing that I think about when you are simplifying your life and you are buying less, perhaps consuming less, is making more use and better use out of those things that you do have. Because, you know, the idea being that you'll have fewer things, and I think there's an opportunity there to be more creative about better using what you already have. So does that make any sense? Like, I think it's kind of fun, actually, to this is going to sound funny, but actually finish the peanut butter in the jar rather than just have it kind of sit there and then you buy new and open up a new peanut butter jar and you still got the old peanut butter that's perfectly good sitting there on the counter. Not that I would know anything about peanut butter, mind you. No, but you know what I'm saying. So to really use up those things that you already have before you go ahead and get something new.
The other thing too is you might buy fewer things, but they might be higher quality because you want them to last. You put a lot more thought into your purchases because you're not going to purchase something again very soon.
Yeah.
So.
You're not going to purchase it with the notion of, oh, you know, you can just throw it out or you know, put it to the back of the pantry if you don't like it.
So it starts with the mindset, right? Now what? So you started saying, you know, some things you can do is go to the local farmers market and things like that. What kinds of things, Diane, do you tell clients to help them simplify, maybe to prepare for you coming to visit them or to stay organized after you're done with them?
Well, you asked how you get started earlier, and really I ask people to envision how they want to live. You know, to really sit and write it down.
That's a big request.
It's actually an exercise I do in the classes that I teach. You know, how ideally do you see yourself living? And you know, that gives you a goal to work towards. And if you see yourself living in a room that's full of light and has a few pieces of furniture, and you know, it's not dusty, and it's you're not going to trip over anything, and the way you're living now is very, very different from that, then it gives you something to work towards. So I ask them to get very specific in their vision.
But we don't want people just throwing stuff out either, right? Because that's, you know, not good for the environment.
Right.
But so, you know, tell us a little bit about the process that you go through.
Well, I donate a lot of stuff. I personally don't, but my clients donate a lot of stuff. I have charities that I work with that come and pick things up, and you know, it's voluminous. I mean, the things that entire houses of furniture and household goods, and I try to encourage them to do that. And some people don't. They like to sell their stuff. People selling stuff, they always think that they're going to get rich off of it, but it doesn't work that way.
A lot of work.
So you're
for a
actually,
I
garage
have
sale.
to say, Craigslist can be very useful.
Yeah.
I've actually just given stuff away on
Yeah.
Craigslist, and that can be. And I think that there's another website that you
there's
can
a
go to
there's
where
a
you can
free
just
Albany.
donate.
Yeah, reuse it.
Free
renew-
cycle.
Free
Recycle, but there's a
It's-
renew it, reuse it, renew it that I get emails from.
Yeah.
I have to caution my clients about putting ads because most of my clients are seniors.
Yeah.
And I don't like to think about them having strangers coming to their homes.
Right.
Well, that's a
So,
consideration.
yeah.
For sure.
So,
Well, Craigslist, I've always had, well, depending on the item, most of the time I've met people out.
Right.
But for Free Cycle in particular, I've done that where we've met at a place and
Right.
exchanged things. Like I've had computers, a big dog crate I was able to get for free. But I think those kinds of sites are very common now so that people can start to exchange
Right.
items or give items away for free rather than keep them in their basement or, what do you call it?
Storage.
Storage. Couldn't
So
say the word.
there really is a sort of a second-hand economy with thrift shops,
Right.
and a lot of the people that I interact with shop primarily second-hand, and that's both good for the environment and, of course, saves money.
I think
Absolutely.
it's kind of thriving right now, is
It
it
is.
not?
It is, yeah.
Because it fits very well with the simple movement and the frugal living movement. Because, if you can buy, I don't know, a dresser set of dresser drawers for $100 used, and it's perfectly good, people may be more inclined to do that. Why not?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how I got started as a young adult. I bought all used stuff.
Well, I think too, though, that we went through this disposable phase where everything was disposable, right? You bought something and it wasn't necessarily put together well, or you didn't expect to keep it for that long. And now I think there's a real shift. At least I think that's true.
Maybe shifting a little, but I don't think we're there yet.
Not as much as we should be.
No.
Well, maybe after the show.
not if you look at the proliferation of, and I'm not saying that as a specific name, but like dollar store kinds of things and discount places that sell, inferior quality stuff.
But
That's still there, but
to be anti-consumerism is almost like being anti-American.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
there's so much rah, 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 and I understand the economy is not good and we're supposed to be out spending money. I mean, that's that really scares me. And I'm not an economist, so I don't really know the solution to this. But for an economy that's built on buying things rather than producing things, to my mind, I wonder how sustainable is that over the long term. Now, we've been at it for 200 some odd years doing it the way we've been doing it, but we've hit a real snag now, and people are wondering how are we going to get ourselves out of this situation. Nobody's really come forward with a really good solution that seems like it's going to work. So I don't know if the little subject that we're, not so little subject, but the subject that we're talking about here, if it fits into the overall discussion about the economy, because what we're suggesting here is a movement away from consumerism as a long-term solution to a couple of different problems, like stress level of having too many things, excessive debt. I mean, how does the simple movement fit into the rest of the cultural issues that we're talking about now? Does it fit into it?
One of the things is the economy's always talked about in terms of growth. We have to grow the economy. And politicians are afraid to not say we have to grow. Well, you can't grow infinitely on a finite planet.
That's right.
And we're realizing that. However, in the simple living movement, sustainability, we want to transition to a more resilient local community. So we're still spending money, but if I'm buying my food from the local farmer, then he's got money and he might buy from another local business. We're still exchanging money. But it's not consumption of disposable things that are, use resources and energy. So we still have an economy, we still have trade, but it's a better way of operating.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know that the last couple of years, I really made an effort to go to the green market in Schenectady, and just being there, there's a real community spirit, but also knowing that this tomato didn't travel from another country, and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but that it's better for you because the nutrients weren't lost and all of those kinds of things. But tell me a little bit about the group that you're involved in, and how do you guys support each other? Like, what are there other groups like that around for folks?
Well, when I started to explore this more and feel like this was the way I wanted to live, I was feeling like, in our society, I'm the only one doing this. And I felt like I needed to connect with other people who were thinking like this. And I stumbled across the Voluntary Simplicity group, and I found a group of people who have been doing this far longer than me. And what's amazing is that they live such satisfying lives, and their children live such satisfying lives, and they eat better, and they're just very happy. And we meet monthly, and what I found was that it was very therapeutic to go and listen to what other people are doing. But people came to the group from all different directions. I initially found the group through renewable energy, trying to make my own energy. And other people come through it via eating local foods, and other people by shopping at thrift shops. So that's what I mean. There's all different ways that you start to tie into this, but I just found that the people are living such satisfying lives. So.
Well, you mentioned that early in the show about that happiness treadmill, and I think we talked about it on another show. But one of the things that makes most advertising, most marketing gives you the sense that you lack something. You lack something. That's why you need to buy something, right? And that if you fill that need, then you're happy, and then and then it lasts about 14 seconds, and then it's on to then I need this, and oh no, maybe this will make me happy. Oh no,
because
that.
it's a lie.
Exactly, and it's all out to sort of make us all feel like we're lacking. And I think one of the things that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but both of you, but by simplifying, it's actually you get back to what's important to you, and you don't feel that sense of lacking. You actually feel like you have everything you need.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
I think it is, and I think, and more in control. I just can't emphasize enough how overwhelming it is to have a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not, I probably wouldn't be defined by you as a person who lives simply, because I have stuff, but to have too much stuff and to have it appear as clutter and underfoot and in your face and everywhere you look is just a very difficult way to live. And I see it with my clients constantly. What else that brings on.
Well, I'm sorry. The thing too is that living simply doesn't mean that you live without the things to make your life comfortable.
Sure.
I have a very comfortable existence, all the modern amenities, but I don't have a desire to get more and more and more stuff. I use less energy, but I have all the modern conveniences. So being frugal allows you to live more simply, but you're not living in poverty, certainly. You're actually living a more fulfilling, satisfying life.
Right, we're not saying you don't have a television, or you don't have a stove, and you don't have heat. We're not talking about that kind of living. I'm glad you said that, because it just occurred to me people might be listening that way.
That's right, yeah.
But we're saying rather not to just keep adding for the sake of adding.
But does it have to do with not having 5 pairs of black pumps? Does it have something? Do you know what pumps are? You're a man. I don't know if you know. 5 pairs of high heel shoes. I mean, does it have something to do with that?
Well, like I said, it can be. You can come at it from so many different ways, but certainly. Simplifying your wardrobe is simplifying. You could gear your wardrobe to a limited number of colors so that you can easily match up something to wear that day, and you only need to buy green and brown socks. That's much more simple. And you don't need your closet can be much less crowded in.
I've always said I needed garanimals, where people would
Yeah.
just, already tell
Overalls.
I actually did that for my 45th birthday. I bought myself a wardrobe consultant who came into my closet, and my experience of my clothes was, I didn't have anything. Well, I have a big closet, and it was just full, like full. And so I was like, I don't have anything, but yet I have a lot of things. Well, what she showed me was that nothing went with each other, and I didn't have a color scheme. I didn't have like 2 or 3 colors that kind of worked together. And for that, I think it was $75 that I spent for her to come in for a couple of hours. That investment of that time and going through the embarrassment of having someone come into my closet for a couple of hours, this perfect stranger, that investment has saved me since then probably $5,000, because what I do buy, I buy less of, and it all works together better, and it saves me space.
And she told me about her, and I had her come to my house, and I did the same thing.
Probably less stressful.
We've been trying to get her as a guest on our show, but we haven't been able to get her.
It's funny, but that's part of what got me into this business, was traveling and having to pack a suitcase
Yes.
and go on an airplane and work in Alaska for 4 months with a suitcase. And all you have to do, to save yourself, not that I want to rain on the parade of the consultant, but is plan a trip overseas and fly there. And you'll figure out your wardrobe quickly.
Yes.
The basics and how to put things together.
Well, there are
because
even-
of the restrictions now.
There are even companies that sell clothing for that reason.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
So you can wear, the same pair of pants a couple of days,
Right.
and things like that.
But you could see how someone would think, oh, well, the solution to my problem is just get more stuff.
Right.
Because the more stuff I have, the more opportunity to combine it, blah, 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 blah. But it was actually the opposite of that. And you're right, Kevin. There was so much stress that I would face when I got up every morning and I would look at this stuff. It was too much. It was overwhelming. There was no coordination to it. There was no strategy to it. It was just more stuff, and it was extremely stressful for me.
One thing I also want to mention, I have a friend who decided that she wasn't going to go to the store to buy any groceries except like milk or perishable items until she used up everything in her pantry. And she actually was blogging about it. And I realized when she was doing that how much food I actually have in my house at any given time. And I have now begun a whole different strategy for grocery shopping based on not having tons and tons of food. And I didn't even think of it as a way of living simpler, but it is really, because I don't spend nearly as much at the grocery store.
And you're using what you have.
That's right. And I'm coordinating meals, so I know when I'm going to have leftover something, and that I never really thought of it as that, but that could be an example too of a simpler
It's
life.
more thoughtful living, right? Wouldn't you say it's thoughtful?
It is very thoughtful living, intentional living.
And you could just bring one area. We're not talking about necessarily transforming your whole existence, but you could pick a particular area that maybe is stressful or is overwhelming, and just work on that particular area.
You actually have to pick one area. In order to be successful, you have to set yourself up for success by selecting one area, having a vision that can then become your goal, and completing that set of tasks.
I have to say one thing before we're almost out of time, but you talked about the holidays, and that has long been one of my, just one of those things where I've struggled, because I am not into like the whole decorating and all, which some people really get into it. It's fine, you should do that. But my point is that I think there are ways that we can make the holidays so much more enjoyable by
More meaningful.
by not putting all the pressure on to have the perfect decorations and buy everybody the perfect gift. I'm so proud of my family. We have decided we adopt a family every year. So instead of giving each other gifts, the adults, we adopt a family. And actually this year last year we adopted 2, this year we adopted 1. And what we would have spent on each other, we just put that money in and we buy for families. We buy food and we buy some toys for the families, and it's so much more meaningful and satisfying, and we know we made a difference in that particular family. And there's all kinds of ideas for how you can do that. And I'm sure if you Google living simply, you'll get a lot of different suggestions. Any last things you want to say before we sign off today?
There's one more thing. You can take it a step further if you're into sustainability, which is such a broad word, but sustainable living isn't always simple, but it's also very satisfying. You can step it up to use less energy, grow your own food. Growing your own food is not simple, but it's related because it's local. And there's doing things like that have other benefits. You're getting outside, you're working with your hands in the soil, and you get some satisfaction from saying, I grew this, and you can preserve it or you can eat it. It's not simple.
Right.
Might
But
be
it
more
is-
sustainable.
Right.
But there's
They are
all these
related,
other.
though.
They are related. There's
Yeah.
all these other benefits. So that's another entire topic that you can.
Another show. Diane, for you, anything before we shut down?
I think I would just repeat my mantra: the less you have, the less you have to organize.
Yeah.
It just
And
makes life
the less
so
you
much
buy,
easier.
the less you have.
Right.
That's right. That's
Exactly.
great.
I'm sorry, I jumped all over what you were saying, but I couldn't resist.
Same difference.
The less you have, the less you have to
Organize.
organize. Very well said. Thank you so much for being our guest. You were really
Thank you.
terrific,
It's
and
a
I'm
pleasure.
sure gave a lot of really good ideas to our viewers. I want to thank you for watching Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan, and we'll see you real soon.